Hi, everyone, and welcome to Mental Health Matters. Today, we are talking about strategies for supporting mental health in young children. At the end of this presentation, you will have an opportunity to ask questions. Please feel free to enter your questions in the Q&A box at any time throughout the presentation, and we will do our best to answer as many as we can. I'm Danielle Nolan, and I'm the social worker on the subject matter expert team here at Autism Ontario, and I'm joined by my colleague Bethany. Can you please introduce yourself?
Thanks, Danielle. Hi, everyone. My name is Bethany Brewin, and I am an occupational therapist and also part of our subject matter expert team here at Autism Ontario.
Today, we are focusing on strategies that you can use in your home and your daily life. We're going to talk about lifestyle strategies, brain and body strategies, including sensory strategies and mindfulness. We're going to talk about how to connect with your young child. And lastly, we will introduce the concept of emotional literacy. We're going to be talking today about several different strategy types. We're going to talk about lifestyle strategies and parenting strategies that can help support your whole family's mental health. And these are changes you can make if they seem like they would support your family. The brain-body strategies are more applicable to your autistic child, and you may want to trial some of these with your child 1 or 2 at a time. It's also important to note that it can be helpful to keep a record of what strategies you try and what the impact is. If you have access to a therapy team, they can help you collect data on whether a strategy is working or not and how to adjust that strategy to try something else. If you don't have access to a therapy team, it can be helpful to use a journal or keep a record of how your child is doing before you try a strategy and notes on what it looks like after you try it. Keep in mind that these strategies can take time. It might look like you're taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but overall, if things are improving, the strategy might be having an effect.
Thanks, Danielle. The first set of strategies we are going to address today is what we're calling lifestyle or environmental strategies. You might remember that when we are talking about mental health, we're talking about our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors, and how we respond to stress or challenges in our day-to-day life. Stress or challenge might look like something that's happening around us in our environment, maybe a loud sound. It might be about learning a new skill, which could be a preschool skill like learning the alphabet, or a life skill like learning how to put on our shoes. It might also be a change to our normal routine, like a new babysitter or a change in our schedule. Lifestyle strategies are things we can put into place throughout our day and from day to day to increase those feelings of safety, security, and predictability that help our brain to feel calm and regulated. Here are some examples. The first is having a predictable schedule. We don't necessarily have to do the same things at exactly the same time or in exactly the same order, but there's a flow and a structure to the day without a lot of new challenge. We can use visuals to help communicate clear expectations and changes in schedule. And again, the purpose of keeping things predictable is that we're limiting the amount of surprises or changes that our child may perceive as stressful. If we look at some more examples of lifestyle strategies on our next slide, we may want to consider how we're planning our daily schedule. So we want to ideally aim for a mix of high and low energy activities. For example, we want to make sure there's a flow to the day with opportunities for movement or exercise and getting outside. So maybe a visit to the playground, as well as times for calming, soothing, and collecting. So maybe quiet time reading a story together. We also want to look at how we're managing transitions or times when we're switching gears from one activity to the next. We want to offer clear communication. So for example, giving a 5-minute warning when we're about to move from one activity to the next. And we can also plan ahead to use some transition strategies. Maybe we'll use a transition object. So maybe if your child's playing with some cars and it's time to get in the car and go on a community outing, you can offer your child a choice. Which one of your cars would you like to bring with us? Or maybe we offer to save a game to come back later. So if you're working on a puzzle together, you can offer the choice, should we clean up this puzzle or should we leave it to finish it later? We can also use songs, stories, and actions to keep our children entertained or engaged during these times of transition. So maybe we're singing or playing a cleanup song together, or maybe we're using a fun action like marching or hopping when we're moving from one activity to the next. In terms of lifestyle strategies, we also want to think about screen time and how that may be contributing to our child's ability to stay regulated during the day. Research shows that autistic children are exposed to more screen time than their neurotypical peers. And we know that screen time is inevitable in our culture, but we want to be mindful of the amount of screen time we're giving our children, as well as paying attention to the type of screen time. So for example, watching a movie together as a family or FaceTiming with grandparents is a very different type of screen time from playing a game on a tablet. We can look for quality sources of content and do our best to engage with our child when they're interacting with screens. And finally, we want to do our best to keep track of the length of screen time. The Hospital for Sick Kids recommends that children ages 2 to 4 have less than 1 hour of screen time per day. Now we're going to move on to talk about the brain and body connection and some brain and body strategies that can support our child's mental health. During the introductory video, we talked about how our brain and body are connected through our nervous system. We talked about information coming in through our senses, being interpreted and processed in our brain, and then leading to an action or behavior or response that we can observe and use as a clue. If we recall that for young children, when we're talking about mental health, we're talking about the ability to stay calm and regulated and to respond to those challenges or stressors in the environment. So then we can start to understand how these brain and body strategies that we're going to be talking about are about providing sensory input into our nervous system that may help to keep our brain feeling calm, safe, and regulated. That way we can access other parts of our brain like our emotions or a sense of connection with others, and our thinking brain so that we can learn and problem solve. Our brain and body sensory strategies might include tools that support seeking behaviors. So if you have a busy child who's constantly looking for more sensory input, they might benefit from sensory tools and strategies that offer movement like jumping or spinning, rhythm like playing music or doing rhythmic movement like rocking or swinging. There's deep pressure where we can have a big hug, or heavy work that involves maybe pushing or pulling a heavy cart or a wagon. Finally, tactile exploration, like using a sensory exploration bin or a water or sand table, can also help to support those seeking behaviors. If, on the other hand, your child is easily overwhelmed by certain sensations or aspects of the environment, so they're avoiding certain senses, they may benefit from tools and strategies that can help to reduce or dampen these sensations. Things like using sensory headphones to reduce noise, maybe wearing sunglasses to reduce bright lights or glare, or having a cozy corner available, which would be a quiet space to hang out and calm our nervous system. Sensory tools are best prescribed by an occupational therapist, and if you have access to an OT, they can usually help to recommend and support the kind that might be best suited to your child. OTs and BCBAs can also support your family in monitoring the use of sensory tools to see if they're achieving their intended goals. If you're interested in learning more about sensory processing and sensory strategies, we do have an Exploring the Senses series, which is linked in the resource section here. And now I'll invite Danielle to help us explore some strategies for mindfulness.
Thanks, Bethany. Another brain-body strategy that we want to talk about today is mindfulness. Mindfulness is an approach to mental health where people are trained to pay attention to the moment and bring awareness to their bodily sensations, their feelings, their thoughts, and their senses. These strategies have aspects of breathing and focusing your attention. Taking deep, controlled breaths brings more air into the body and helps calm your body and your nervous system. Research shows that mindfulness activities consistently have a positive impact on the well-being of young children and you, their caregivers. There are countless mindfulness and breathing exercises that can be found online or on Pinterest, and you can find one that works best for your child. Young children often benefit from ones that are tangible, so practicing blowing bubbles or pretending your finger is a birthday cake candle and having a deep breath in and blowing out the flame. I've also had families who prefer to use podcasts or playlists that guide the mindfulness activities. Bedtime Explorers is a popular one, and there are a few more on your resource list that's attached to this presentation. As we talked about in the introduction to this series, connecting, engaging, and co-regulating are all important strategies for supporting your young child's mental health. Sometimes these strategies are called serve and return, And the idea is that you and your child have responsive interactions, and these interactions foster healthy emotional and social development. This style of intervention has been shown to improve not only the young child's external mental health and behaviors, but the mental health of their caregivers as well. These strategies involve child-led play and exploring your child's unique interests. Floor time is one evidence-based treatment for young children with autism that has proven benefits. There are similar philosophies you might have heard of, like the 10-minute miracle. But the general rule is for about 20 minutes a day, you be on the floor with the child and you join in their world. Another similar model is the Denver Early Start model, and it talks about becoming a calming presence in your child's world before trying to interrupt or direct play in a different way. I like that model because it really emphasizes just finding your child's smile or finding your child's joy. This can mean using whatever your child likes to engage with and having it become the toy or the fun object. I had a client a couple of years ago who really only liked blue plastic plates. So his parents bought him a dozen of them, and they used them as blocks. They would spin them, they would line them up, anything to engage their child and foster that joy and trust. There is a link on your resource list for information on serve and return, floor time, and the Denver Early Start models. There are many different play-based strategies that can be used to continue to build that connection. You can do copycat or mirroring games. You can do pretend play like hairbrushing or nail painting or playing doctor. Art is a really great strategy with paint or shaving cream, finger paint beading, drawing, whatever your child really likes. Same with music and with reading. You're just looking for ways to connect and to have some fun together. The last strategy we want to talk about today is building emotional literacy. As we talked about in the introduction, self-regulation is really difficult, and mostly because emotional literacy takes time to learn and practice and understand. Young children do not have the capacity or the skills needed to do this. To be able to effectively self-regulate, your child needs to have an internal awareness of how they feel in their body, match that to an emotion word or a feeling, and then find ways to resolve the body feeling or the emotion. At this stage, what parents can do is begin to introduce what emotions are and what they might look like. I'm going to show you on the next slide some examples of how to do this. There are many different tools and examples for building emotional literacy. Throughout this series, we will talk about different examples, but for today's age group, I want to focus on highly visual resources, like board books, such as The Way I Feel, the Feelings Book, or the Color Monster, photographs of people with different emotions, movies such as Inside Out, and even songs like If You're Happy and You Know It. On your resource list, you will find links to some of these books through an online resource called Aid Canada. They have a resource library and you can borrow books and they actually will send them to your home. You can also check out your local, community, or school library. You can also connect with any service providers you may have, or even your child's teacher or daycare staff, and ask them about emotional literacy and find out if they can help with these goals and skills. As we mentioned in our introduction, there are 4 parts to this mini-series, and 3 of these focus on age-specific strategies. If you missed watching the introduction, you can find the link on your resource list, and it's available now on demand. We encourage you to continue to join us throughout these sessions, as there may be strategies that are helpful for your child and family, regardless of their chronological age. And don't worry if you're unable to attend all 3 sessions. We will be recording them, and they will be available on demand as well. The link is here on the slide if you're looking to access the introduction or if you want to come back to it later. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to our Mental Health Matters mini-series. Today, we are actually talking about strategies for young children. So there was an introduction sent to you ahead of time that you can access at any time on YouTube. And I know we have put the link in the chat in case you missed it and you want a chance to look over that introductory video. I'm Danielle, and I am the social worker on our subject matter expert team. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Beth. Beth, do you want to introduce yourself again?
Hello, I'm Bethany. I'm an occupational therapist by background, and we are ready to answer some of your questions.
So just below the slides, there is a little box that says Q&A. So if there are any questions that you'd like us to answer, please just type them in there and we will address them. I know a few of you did submit some questions with registration, so we'll start with some of those. We do have a parent asking here, Beth, about sensory issues and how to navigate those with a 5-year-old. This particular parent has said that they're getting to the point where the child doesn't want to wear clothes, especially now that we're getting into that winter boot time.
For sure. And that is a very common question and a very common concern. That's one of the reasons we shared as part of the resources. We do have a three-part series that I led about a year and a half ago called Exploring the Senses. It gives a little bit of background around what we mean when we're talking about sensory processing and sensory processing differences. And it also goes through a whole list of strategies that you can use at home and at school. So if you haven't checked that out already, I would encourage you to take a look in the resources. And also to connect, if you do have an opportunity to connect with an occupational therapist, whether that's someone who's part of your team, if you're accessing core clinical services, or whether that's someone who's part of your school team, they might have some specific suggestions that might apply best to you and your child. Thinking about things like putting on clothes, and especially now when we're getting into cold weather season and having to put on boots and jackets. Again, that is a common concern. OTs might talk about things like desensitization. They might use special brushing techniques or show you how you can do some of those at home. So always best to connect with a professional just so you can get some of those specific recommendations.
And
did you have anything to add, Danielle?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if the child is not in school yet, are there ways for families to look into occupational therapy?
Absolutely. And I think we are able to share some of that in the chat where people can access, if you are already connected with the Ontario Autism Program, we will put some of that information in the chat.
And I think too, you can look into some of the things through the children's treatment centers in your communities. So it's always good to ask around to family physicians or other people that you're working with to see if you might have access to occupational therapy to help with some of those sensory pieces.
If you're looking to connect specifically with an OT, you can look up the College of Occupational Therapists of Ontario. So that's codo.org. Maybe we'll pop that in the chat as well. And there is a section there to search for a provider. So you can look for someone in your area and someone that may have experience with autism and with pediatrics.
Perfect. There's lots of other questions here, so we will move on a little bit. I just have a couple of questions here around sleep and how to help with any sleep concerns in our young child population.
For sure. And I think we did touch on that when we were talking about things like lifestyle factors, right? So we know as parents, if we haven't had a good night's sleep, that can really affect how we're able to regulate ourselves during the day. And that applies also for our kids, right? If they're having, especially if they're having consistent issues with sleeping, having a hard time falling asleep or staying asleep or waking up early or waking up throughout the night, that can really impact their ability to deal with those small and big stressors throughout the day. My colleague, Kristen, who's our BCBA on our team, and we've been running a workshop, a sleep workshop, and we will be actually putting together a resource as well in the spring. So you can stay tuned for that, or you can contact us for more information about when those next workshops will be offered. Again, that's another one to check in with your family doctor. Maybe there is an underlying medical concern that's affecting how your child is able to fall asleep or stay asleep, and they might have some recommendations to support that.
I think I was just going to tag on to your workshop piece. We do have lots of different workshops coming up, and there is another question here about caregiver stress and marital strain. And so there are a few different organizations that would be able to provide some support for your whole family around that kind of concern. So the Ontario Caregiver Association has groups, and they have a phone line, and they have peer support. So they have a few different resources specific to caregivers. So we will pop that link in the chat. We also do run a CARES support group. So that is a support group run out of Autism Ontario, specifically for parents of children with autism. The groups for the fall are full, but there will be new registrations coming out in January. So watch our Facebook page or our Instagram, and we can put the link for those events in the chat as well. And we do have a caregiver guide. So there is a caregiver guide that we put together just this year that talks about different ways of how to support your own mental health as a caregiver in the home. And we will be doing that as a workshop as well in January. So lots of things to watch for if you're interested in some of those caregiver well-being, caregiver stress pieces.
And I think that actually might be important to note, Danielle, with some of these questions, that these are common concerns that we're hearing from lots of parents and lots of caregivers. And that drives the resources that we're putting together and the programs that we're able to offer. So if you do have a question and you're hearing it show up here, that means that lots of parents are experiencing the same thing. So just to help validate and feel that you're not alone in this.
Absolutely. And mental health of the whole family is part of what we want to talk about always when we have a conversation about mental health for children. And I know there are a couple of other questions here too, just about supporting emotional intelligence and supporting mental health as a whole family. And we do want to emphasize things like just finding some joy and having some fun. And the question very specifically says, we're always so focused on treating and we're always so focused on diagnosis, but it's important to remember that you as a whole family are very important. And so the mental health of you as caregivers is important, the mental health of the siblings in the home. So just making sure that everyone is supported is important and it's valid. So we want to make sure that we've given lots of services and lots of options for everyone within your family.
And also reinforcing that just the fact that you're here today and joining us to learn more about mental health, both for your child and for yourself, says a lot and is kind of that first step on that path to being able to understand your child better and to be able to understand that relationship between their mental health and your ability to support them as a parent. So thanks for joining us today. You are welcome to join us as well. We do have a series next week for sort of older elementary students and for teens and youth the following week. So you may find some strategies in those presentations, even if you have a younger child, that may be relevant for your child as well.
We do have another specific question in here around a sensory need, just around some of that head tapping. So this particular child likes to pull hair or tap heads for fun. And so they're just looking for other options that they might want to look into from a sensory perspective to meet that need.
That is another good question. We did touch on sensory earlier. Another recommendation where I would ask you to maybe check in with your medical team as well. Sometimes we notice things maybe as simple or as complex as having a recurring ear infection or having a headache or feeling thirsty. Some of those interoceptive pieces where if we don't have a good sense or a good grasp, if your child doesn't have a good sense of what's going on in their own body and they just have some of these sensations that they're trying to reconcile, maybe having a headache might feel better to be tapping on heads. And then sometimes that becomes a behavior that's repeated even when they don't necessarily have that sensation. So again, a good one to check in with an OT, BCBA, or a mental health professional if you're looking for further support that way.
So it looks like we might be finished up with questions. Just we'll give everybody a couple more minutes in case there's something that they're typing. But we will, as Beth said, continue this series looking at kind of that next age group, looking at school age children, which we've kind of said is anywhere between like 6 and 12. But you might find strategies that are most helpful for your whole family or for your young child or for a sibling. So please do feel free to join us again for all the different upcoming sessions, as sometimes we know with autistic kids specifically that not everything needs to be right on at a specific age. There might be a strategy that could benefit somebody else in your family or that could benefit your child that we might have lumped with the elementary school students, but that doesn't necessarily mean it won't be helpful. When we finish up here, you will get a little pop-up box that asks for feedback. The feedback is very important to Beth and I as we do make modifications. We do change how we present information. So please do give us some feedback. Let us know how this went, and we will see you again next week.
Thank you for joining us.